My name is Howard Frumkin. As you heard in the introduction, I direct the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry together with the National Center for Environmental Health.
The first thing we noticed in Atue when he was born was that he had 6 fingers in his right hand. And as the days passed by, we noticed that he had a 3rd nipple. Atue was diagnosed with the association of the Mate syndrome. Our youngest son, of 3 years old, has an asthma condition since he was born. I take this opportunity to exhort you, Dr. Frumkin, and the agency that you represent, to review and do all the necessary studies and correct all the error. Our people are dying, for we humbly ask to revalidate the contamination studies and long-term effects, utilizing all the data available so that we can preserve the most important, which is our health. We have seen how women, men, and children confront a cancer diagnosis.
Doctor, I have a deep commitment to caring for people who need care.
We have absolutely no doubt about the relationship between the serious health crisis that attacks our community and the military contamination.
I don't have words to describe the look of a terrain that has been bombed for so many years and where there's so much destruction.
The studies carried out by the ATSDR have been very segmented.
The ATSDR used results from an EPA evaluation of water in Vieques, but failed to acknowledge that EPA does not routinely test the contaminants associated with the U.S. Navy activities in Vieques. Studies used by ATSDR to conclude that there was no risk for the Vieques population only served to demonstrate the lack of sound scientific evidence.
If I lived downwind from that history, I too would be as concerned as you all are.
En el caso de la agencia que usted dirige.
In reference to your agency and the studies that you carry, we're overwhelmed to learn that your studies reveal no relationship between both matters.
How is it possible that in your studies everything turns out to be healthy and the environment clean?
Everything we do is to serve people, care for people, make people's lives better. I promise you that that's what we're about.
There was no prior history of cancer in my family in 1986. We know they use chaff, we know they use napalm, we know they use Agent Orange, but what else did they experiment with?
I care deeply about justice and I care deeply about protecting health.
26.8 of the women sampled in Vieques had mercury levels that were unhealthy as a lifetime exposure. To our surprise also, a significant number of the women on Vieques had levels of mercury that were dangerous to the fetus.
Vieques health shows 2 very distinct faces, one before the Navy, one after the Navy. What does uranium do in the body of a Viequense? Uranium in the body of a Viequense, increase in the amount of heart disease, kidney disease, and also respiratory illnesses. You have never taken into serious consideration the important scientific studies done by our scientific advisors, who are just as good or better than any in the world. The Navy has been using for many years now these scientific studies done by ATSDR that have been strongly criticized by many. These studies have been used by the Navy to deny any relationship between the horrible destruction done by their military practices and the serious health crisis suffered by our community.
Here we have seen all types of cancer. We've even seen our children die. And if not, you can ask for the case of Millie V. Millie V was a simple child of a struggle. You've even seen deformed animals in the countrysides of Vieques. What we have in our soil is not good. And even then the FDR said that everything was fine. And it's not fair. We're not guinea pig, and that's how they've been treating us for all these past years.
It's a question of biomonitoring. And I have to say that I was unaware of this study until now, and I'm very grateful to see it.
So we trust and wait on your good judgment and the one of the agency that you represent. so that together we can realize the work that will provoke and result in a better quality of life.
We respectfully ask your agency to review and to begin again a series of studies about the relationship between the horrible military toxics and health on our island.
ATSDR conclusions were based on faulty methods and biased documents. For example, the H2M Hill study documented background levels that were not considered by ATSDR at that moment.
Nosotros queremos pedirle a la agencia que usted dirige.
We want to ask you to very, very seriously take into consideration the findings of our scientific advisors here tonight. We respectfully ask you to reevaluate again the situation of our health. Please go back and take another look at all of those studies done by your agency.
We don't have all the data from the Navy. It's very important for us to try to get the data from the Navy.
Please analyze the situation and give us results that really come from your consciousness.
But I will promise you that we will try as hard as we possibly can to get full information about what was used.
We take this opportunity to also denounce the use of open detonation and burning of both unexploded ordnance and vegetation in the ex-bombing range. These practices, supposedly related to cleanup, bring more contamination into our environment. I want to express again our confidence that upon reflection you will arrive at a conclusion, scientific conclusions that will be just both for you and for our community. If there's one thing that we can all be in agreement about, it's that the earlier conclusions were not just.
Así que en la misma medida en que los estudios previos de ATSDR significan la muerte para nuestra comunidad.
In the same measure that the previous studies by ATSDR represent for our community the death and sickness of our people, the hope for new scientific studies, really new scientific studies here, with the genuine participation of our community and our scientists, also represent hope for the future.
And you have toxic substance in the title of your agency, and it's hardly ever mentioned, and it's one of the most toxic. And the timing even of the use of depleted uranium here that we know. When it began, we don't know exactly. This is another mystery from the Navy.
We do have some information about the use of depleted uranium. It wasn't looked at in the first round of ATSDR studies. We will now. I don't know that we have full information either about when it was used and how much was used and so on. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was involved in some of the recovery efforts, so that will be one of the things that we look at.
I just want to correct your statement, because in one of the studies you did mention that you consider the Nuclear Regulatory Council report, Commission report on depleted uranium in Vieques. And when we submitted our comments to your public health assessment, we specifically mentioned that you have used those studies from the NRC, and that we understood and mentioned why we believe that those studies from the NRC were flawed. So you did use those studies.
I must have given Dr. Frumkin the wrong information about depleted uranium. Obviously, as you say, we have looked at it, and we'll continue to look at that issue.
As university professor, we gave ATSDR an F.
The consensus of the community, its advisors, public officials, is that as part of that fresh look, you take into account the independent scientific studies, but you start with a fresh new foundation. And as you recently did with Camp Lejeune, you withdraw those old studies and start taking a truly fresh look. That's our proposal to you, and we welcome your answer to see if you're willing to follow that procedure. Thanks again.
We must tell the truth about Vieques. And some people don't want to hear the truth for very big economic reasons. Thank you.
The only thing to say is thank you. I deeply appreciate your coming here and joining us. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to start fresh, not only with our science, but with our collaboration with this community. Thank you all very much for coming on behalf of all of us.